Welcome to Advanced Topics in Postmodern Astrology, Lecture Series 4. I am Professor Elena Voss, Department of Theoretical and Applied Astrology. Today we examine three interlocking developments that I believe define the frontier of serious astrological work in the 21st century: the deliberate incorporation of concepts from quantum mechanics, the operational recognition of what I call sentient variant beings, and the construction of original techniques that follow from those two recognitions. Let me begin with a methodological statement. Astrology has always been a symbolic language that describes correlations between celestial patterns and terrestrial events. Quantum mechanics is a mathematical formalism that describes the behavior of matter and energy at the smallest scales. These are not the same domain. Nevertheless, certain structural features of quantum theory, superposition, entanglement, the role of the observer, and the probabilistic nature of outcomes map with surprising utility onto the practical problems that advanced astrologers actually face. We are not claiming that planetary positions are quantum wave functions. We are claiming that the chart behaves, in lived experience, more like a participatory informational field than like a fixed mechanical clock. Consider superposition. In the standard Copenhagen interpretation, a quantum system exists in a linear combination of possible states until a measurement is performed. In natal work, we have long treated secondary progressions, solar arc directions, tertiary progressions, and converse directions as separate techniques. A postmodern approach treats them as coexisting potential trajectories within a single superposition. The technique I call multi trajectory mapping requires the calculation of at least three of these systems for the same period. The practitioner then identifies zones where two or more trajectories converge within a tight orb, say 2 degrees, and treats those zones as regions of heightened possibility rather than as competing predictions. The client's sustained attention, choices, and emotional investment function analogously to the measuring apparatus. Different clients, or the same client at different levels of engagement, will preferentially collapse different trajectories. This is not relativism. It is a recognition that the chart plus the observer forms a closed system. Entanglement provides a second useful analogy. Once two quantum systems have interacted, their states remain correlated even when separated by large distances. In synastry, we observe something similar. The composite or Davison chart is not merely an average. It is a record of a relational field that continues to respond to transits long after the two individuals are no longer in physical proximity. An original technique I have developed, entanglement indexing, begins by identifying the date of the first significant mutual activation, usually the first exact transit from one chart to the other, or the date of first meeting if it is known. That date is treated as the entanglement event. Subsequent transits to the composite are scored according to whether they also aspect the original entanglement degree or the natal planets that formed the first contact. High scores indicate periods of non local reactivation. Clinical observations suggest that these periods often coincide with unexpected communication, parallel life developments, or the reemergence of unresolved relational material even when the two people have no ordinary contact. We now turn to the more controversial element of this lecture: sentient variant beings. By this phrase, I do not mean traditional planetary deities, nor purely psychological complexes. I mean informational or consciousness bearing agencies that appear to be associated with specific chart configurations and that exhibit responsiveness, intentionality, and a degree of autonomy. Three categories have proven useful in practice. First, certain fixed stars, when they form tight parent relationships with personal planets or angles, behave as if they carry a distinct intelligence that is not identical with the planetary principle. Regulus, Algol, Antares, and Fomalhaut are the most frequently reported. Second, major asteroids, especially those that are angular or that repeatedly aspect the luminaries across multiple progression systems, often display a consistent character that clients experience as someone else speaking through the configuration. Third, and most speculative, are the variant selves or parallel timeline expressions of the native. During periods of high activation, particularly when the progressed moon or a solar arc planet crosses a sensitive degree that has previously been linked to anomalous synchronicities, some clients report contact with a version of themselves that seems to inhabit a different developmental trajectory. Whether these reports are best understood as psychological, imaginal, or genuinely interdimensional is an open question. What matters for technique is that the configurations behave as if they are dialogical. The original method developed for working with these phenomena is the Variant Dialogue Protocol. The steps are as follows. Identify a chart point that shows repeated anomalous timing accuracy or strong subjective numinosity. Calculate the next three applications of the progressed moon to that point or the next solar arc exact aspect. In the days surrounding those exact hits, the practitioner and, if appropriate, the client enter a structured contemplative or oracular state while focusing on the degree and the associated star, asteroid, or variant signature. Information received is recorded without immediate interpretation. The information is then tested against subsequent transits and against the client's lived experience over the following 6 to 12 months. Only those communications that demonstrate predictive or clarifying value are retained as part of an ongoing relationship with that variant. Over years of practice, a small number of points in a given chart may develop into reliable interlocutors. This is not channeling in the popular sense. It is a disciplined, falsifiable engagement with chart factors that refuse to remain purely symbolic. A fourth original technique follows from the observer effect. Traditional house systems assume a fixed spatial division of the celestial sphere relative to the birth horizon. In quantum terms, the act of observation participates in defining the system under study. The observer dependent house system operationalizes this insight for consultation work. When a client presents a specific question, the significator of that question, whether a planet, a house ruler, or a sensitive degree, is temporarily placed on the ascendant by rotation. The resulting house cusps become the operative field for that inquiry alone. Natal houses remain the baseline structure. The rotated houses form a parallel, question specific overlay. In practice, this often clarifies why certain topics become activated under particular transits while others remain quiet. Timing itself is reconceived. Instead of hunting for single exact hits, the postmodern practitioner maps open intervals, periods of several days to several weeks during which multiple systems, perfections, secondary progressions, solar arcs, and major transits converge within a defined orb. These open intervals are treated as zones of elevated possibility. Within the zone, the client's choices, the activity of any engaged variant beings, and ordinary environmental factors co-determine the specific form the possibility takes. Prediction becomes the identification of the zone and the qualitative character of the potentials available inside it, rather than the assertion of a single inevitable event. A brief word on ethics is required. The language of quantum mechanics and the recognition of sentient variants can easily slide into vagueness or spiritual inflation. The techniques I have described increase, rather than decrease, the demand for precision, documentation, and humility. Superposition does not justify saying anything is possible. Entanglement does not excuse the projection of the astrologer's material onto the client. Dialogue with variant beings does not replace ephemeris work or the careful delineation of natal promise. The postmodern astrologer remains accountable for clear distinctions between symbolic, psychological, and speculative claims and for leaving the client's capacity for choice intact. To recapitulate the five original techniques presented today: 1. Multi-trajectory mapping, the simultaneous calculation and comparative reading of multiple progression systems as coexisting potentials within a superposition. 2. Entanglement indexing, the tracking of non-local relational correlations through the history of composite and mutual activations. 3. Variant dialogue protocol, a structured, testable method for engaging chart points that behave as responsive intelligences. 4. Observer-dependent house system, temporary, inquiry-specific house overlays generated by rotating a significator to the ascendant. 5. Open interval timing, the identification of zones of heightened possibility rather than single exact predictive hits. These techniques are offered as working hypotheses. They are to be tested in practice, refined through collective observation, or discarded when they fail to yield useful results. Right? Postmodern astrology does not aim at a closed system. It aims at a more accurate description of the living field in which natal charts, human consciousness, and possibly non human or variant intelligences participate. That concludes the formal lecture. For next week, select one natal chart you know intimately. Calculate secondary progressions, solar arcs, and tertiary progressions for the current calendar year. Mark every zone in which two or more systems converge within 2 degrees. Note any fixed stars or asteroids that participate in those convergences. Bring both the calculations and your phenomenological observations to the seminar. We will examine several of them together. Thank you for your attention.